The expiration date on this new and gimmicky Ravens offense is coming, and when that day inevitably arrives, the harsh reality of it is going to completely and ruthlessly bury this team.
Shit like I'm Dennis. I started this, I'm a business. Be hating, trying to blemish my image. He want the smoke, 2 to 3 K with the scope. Extended clip long as a rope. We rob his nose, just like he had him a coat. I knew the boy was a pull up with the gang. You know that we buying it. What is your setting? What is you claiming? I am a beast.
Seeing Lamar Jackson live is an amazing experience. I don't think I've ever seen in person a quarterback run with such suddenness and remarkable agility in space, while also having the arm strength to effortlessly throw the ball 50 yards down the field. I watched this Ravens team beat up the Falcons when I was in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and throughout the game, I just kept thinking that this was probably what it was like back in the day for Falcons fans to watch a young Mike Vick run around the Georgia Dome. This kid is a transcendent physical talent, and I thoroughly enjoyed every snap that I watched him take that day. But at the same time, for all of the excitement and potential in his game, I still left Mercedes-Benz Stadium with one overall conclusion that I truly hope I will eventually be wrong on. The expiration date on this new and gimmicky Ravens offense is coming, and when that day inevitably arrives, the harsh reality of it is going to completely and ruthlessly bury this team. It is easy to look at numbers and get sucked into a narrative that makes sense on the surface every now and then. Believe me, even I do it myself, because at the end of the day, numbers usually give us things to compare, things to build trends out of, and ultimately information to help us form opinions. But when looking at numbers, sometimes the context behind them can get a little bit lost. So my goal this week was to try to show why the numbers within the Ravens run game are so incredibly and historically high, and why the context behind those numbers can give us a new perspective on them. The Ravens have rushed 234 times across the 5 games that Lamar Jackson has started so far, which is a ludicrously high average of just under 47 carries a game. For context, in those 5 games, Baltimore has already amassed 78% of the Falcons, Packers, and Giants' total rushing attempts for the entire season. In terms of yards, they've already racked up over 1,100 yards in that same time frame for an average of 230 yards per game. And again, for some context, that is only 1 yard shy of matching the Cardinals' total rushing output for the year, but Lamar Jackson did it in 5 weeks. For the whole season, Baltimore has gone from what was on pace to be the 30th ranked rushing offense in the NFL to now being second in the league, only behind Seattle. They climbed 28 spots in just over a month. And keep in mind that this is later in the season too, when it's a lot harder to make a big statistical jump like that. To say that this is a historic mid-season turnaround for a rushing offense is a massive understatement. And I legitimately have never seen any trend like this ever in the National Football League. All of that being said though, even if the Ravens have run the ball seemingly at will for the last 5 weeks, we still have 2 very important questions to ask. What were the causes of that uptick in production, and can that production be sustained long enough to make the Ravens a legitimate playoff threat? Or, in short, what is the context behind all of this that the numbers won't show? That is where tape comes in, and if the tape has said anything plain as day over the last week that I've studied it, it's this. The Ravens are not really dominating anybody physically. They aren't blowing teams off the ball. They aren't crushing edge defenders or picking up linebackers on the second level. They are running the ball with scheme, not execution, which is why they went from one of the worst to one of the best rushing teams in the league when their scheme radically changed in the middle of the year. And that scheme change right there is my biggest concern about the future of this Ravens offense, because if you can out-execute a defense, it doesn't really matter what scheme you run. You're going to have success. But if you have to solely rely on scheme to do all the work for you because you cannot execute otherwise, that's when you have problems. That's why the great zone read revolution of 2012 with Kaepernick and RG3 died very, very quickly once defenses figured them out and dared them to execute without that handicap. Schemes don't last forever, and eventually defensive coaches will come up with answers to beat your offensive schemes. And at that point is when your ability or inability to execute in other ways determines if you win or lose. I flat out do not believe that the Ravens can execute when their comfort zone is taken away from them, and all it's going to take to show that is for one defense to stay disciplined and test that theory. This concept right here is pretty much the backbone of the Ravens run game right now, and by extension, the backbone of the entire Ravens game plan itself. It's kind of like an inside zone, kind of like a zone read, kind of like a duo, but not really. It's pretty much its own thing, but it borrows from a lot of other already established run concepts that every other team uses, and the key to defending it is right here with this edge defender at the point of attack. It doesn't matter if it's being run to the strong side or to the weak side, this edge defender controls a lot of what happens. And that is because the offensive tackle, or in some cases the tight end that is under them, will often not block the edge defender at all. And they will either double team the defensive tackle to wash them down, or immediately climb to the second level to get to the will, or just give a slight little jam to the edge defender before climbing up to the second level, or some combination of all three, depending on which particular wrinkle of this concept is called. And so with very little blocking attention being given to that play side edge defender, the Ravens are trying to freeze him in between several different potential assignments. Does he immediately shoot inside to close down the wide open running lane behind that double team since they're not blocking him? Or does he stay outside just in case the quarterback keeps it and tries to get to the edge? Or on top of that, if they bring this tight end over as a lead blocker, does he take on that block as if it's a trap block and just hold the edge? Does he attack inside of that block and close down on the inside lane yet again? If the tight end doesn't block him at all and just keeps on going to the edge, does he assume that Lamar Jackson kept the ball and try to run him down? Or does he stay in that inside lane anyway? Maybe he should assume that it's play action and that the tight end is slipping out to the flat. Should he cover him? Should he not? There are so many little wrinkles that the Ravens regularly use out of only one formation that edge defenders can sometimes get frozen in between 7 or 8 different possibilities all at once. And if you're trying to do 7 or 8 things at once, trust me, you won't even be able to do one thing very well at all. And that's what Baltimore is betting on every single time they run this play or any play like it. They are trying to paralyze defenses with possibilities and test their discipline on every snap. See, the truth is that this edge defender does not have to be everywhere at once. They only have to be in one place, and that's inside. It doesn't matter what kind of play the Ravens run out of this formation, his one and only job on every snap should be to crash inside, attack the void left by that double team, and spill every single inside run back outside. That's his one job, and the one job of the linebacker behind him is to get outside of that edge defender and catch everything that is being spilled out to him. Don't worry about coming downhill, don't worry about scraping over the top to the other side of the formation, none of that matters. His one job is to get outside, cover the ass of the edge defender in front of him, and when the edge defender spills the play out, he fills it in. Now, the corner outside, his job is to play a force role. He forces everything back inside of his position, especially if Jackson keeps the ball and tries to get to the boundary. With how explosive Jackson is out in space, his role is just as important as all the others because he's the only one who can 100% reliably make Lamar cut back, which gives the rest of the defense a chance to catch up. So again, from outside in, it goes force, fill, spill. Those are the 3 pillars of sound run defense. One to force in, one to spill out, and one to fill in between to clean it all up. Without those 3 pillars, the whole structure falls down, and that is what the Ravens have been counting on. So when we look back at these last 5 games for Baltimore, all of their absurd rushing totals, at least based on my view of the tape, are really more about a lack of discipline on the defense's part rather than some sort of overwhelmingly effective execution on the offense's part. Which I guess makes sense considering that the Ravens' 5 opponents during that time, the Bengals, Raiders, Falcons, Chiefs, and Buccaneers, are 5 of the bottom 8 run defenses in the league. Collectively, they have all displayed a nauseating lack of discipline this year, and the Ravens preyed on that. Game after game, snap after snap, it was the same problem. Either edge defenders were not shooting inside to do their job, or linebackers were not scraping outside to do their job, or corners all the way out on the edges were not in force positions to do their jobs. These defenses were not getting out-muscled or pushed around or physically dominated at all. They just could not stop making mental errors that were basically giving up rushing yards for free. I think the Bengals game might have had some of the best examples of how just simple defensive discipline determined whether the Ravens were successful or not. Take a look at this snap from late in the first quarter, and again, this is a different personnel grouping and a different formation than the original diagrammed example, but the general concept is the same on this run, and I would say that it's their most common concept that they use in the run game when you add up all of its variations. You've got a double team on the backside, a double team on the front side that works its way to the will linebacker, and the defensive end, Michael Johnson, is unblocked. Now, this tight end coming across could be going for a trap block to try to seal him out, or he could just blow right on by him and lead block for Jackson out to the edge. But either way, Johnson's one job is to flatten down the line of scrimmage as fast as possible and close down that inside lane. It doesn't matter whether he has to go through that tight end to do it or not. He is not supposed to sit outside in no man's land and read Lamar Jackson, because if he sits out there, he won't be able to get back inside quick enough to handle any potential dive from Alex Collins. So he's not reading Lamar at all. And believe it or not, Lamar is not reading him either. Look at Jackson's eyes. They are not pointed at the unblocked defender. That's how you know it's not a zone read or an RPO or anything like that, because he's not actually reading anything. The Ravens actually barely run any zone read at all. People just think it's zone read because they like to leave defenders unblocked, but Jackson's not reading anything on this play as he hands the ball off. It's going to go to the running back whether Johnson crashes down or not. Now, as Collins and Jackson go through the mesh point, watch Vontaze Burfict start to get outside here to fill, while Sean Williams does his best to get outside leverage on the tight end to force. All three roles are taken care of. Force, fill, spill. This is what gap discipline looks like. So as Collins gets the ball, Johnson's not worried about the tight end going past him to potentially block for Lamar out on the edge. That's not his job to worry about it. That's Burfict's and Williams' jobs. The one and only thing he has to do is shoot inside, shut down the run lane since they decided not to block him, and not miss the tackle. He does all three, and the result is a no gain on the play. That is how you dominate this Ravens run game. Just do your job. In the next quarter, the Ravens ran a different wrinkle of that same play from a slightly different formation, and the difference between that run for no gain from Collins and an 8-yard gain from Jackson was simply one linebacker not doing their job. Again, you've got the double teams working and the left tackle getting to the second level while leaving the play side defensive end unblocked. The U tight end, which is Nick Boyle, is coming across the formation to fake that trap block again, and you can see that Lamar is still not reading the defensive end, and he's just looking at the mesh point with Collins. It's almost the exact same play. This is not a zone read or an RPO or anything like that. It's just a designed quarterback keeper where Jackson would be keeping it no matter what the defense was doing. Now, you can see the unblocked defensive end, Carlos Dunlap, working his way down the line of scrimmage to close off that inside running lane for Collins, which is what he's supposed to do. But look at Vincent Ray behind him. He's not scraping outside to cover Dunlap, and instead he's also chasing inside and going against his responsibility. He has no reason to do this. If the run is inside, Dunlap is not blocked. He's going to be the one to make that tackle. Ray's one job is to handle the tight end if the tight end keeps running past Dunlap so that Dunlap doesn't have to worry about it. By the time Ray realized that he messed up and didn't stick to his assignment, the tight end already had a great angle on him to the edge, and Jackson had nothing but green grass in front of him. Literally, all he had to do was just scrape outside off the snap to put himself in a good position to take on the tight end's block so that he could then force Jackson to cut back into the heart of the defense, but for whatever reason, he just didn't do it. If you want to know why the Ravens have run for boatloads of yards against really terrible defenses, this is why. Because terrible defenses have no communication, no discipline, and no situational awareness. It was almost entirely terrible film. But in the few occasions where those defenses did figure out their discipline issues, the Baltimore run game tended to slow to a crawl almost instantly because they didn't have much else going for them. In the Chiefs game, for example, over the course of the first quarter, the Ravens ran the ball 10 times for 83 yards and a touchdown with a whopping 8.3 yards per carry. It was total statistical domination, complete with an 8-play, 75-yard touchdown drive that did not feature a single pass. The Chiefs were undisciplined, Dee Ford was completely lost in his role as the spill defender from the edge, and the Ravens ran pretty much unopposed for the first 15 or so minutes of the game. But then, as you might suspect, they figured out Baltimore's scheme. And for the rest of the game, which if you factor in overtime was almost an entire game's worth of drives, the Ravens were back to their old pedestrian numbers of only 3.7 yards per carry and just over 100 yards of total production on the ground across 30 more carries. Once their scheme was taken away from them, they were not good enough up front to execute anything else, and they had to rely on their extraordinarily good defense and a very timely 55-yard punt return just to keep them in the game. And I know there are some Ravens fans watching this saying, well, Brett, whether Kansas City figured out the run game or not, they still took them to the wire in Arrowhead, and they still did manage to beat the other 4 bad teams they played against during this 4-1 stretch. Does all of that count for nothing? And, well, kinda, yeah. The Ravens have put 5 games of tape out there already showing...
Oh, damn, bro. That's fucked up. He said, well, kinda, yeah. Oh, Brett, you a hater, bro. Alright. Brett, you sound like you hating, bro. I'm sorry. I know the numbers don't lie, but I'm just saying. It sound like you hating. Well, kinda, yeah. It sound like you hating. It just kind of do, bro. I'm sorry. I love your videos, though.
How to beat, and more importantly, how to get beaten by all of Greg Roman's rushing concepts. And the team that they are playing against this week just so happens to be coached by Anthony.
We got a new coordinator also, so I don't know. Does that count for nothing? I don't know.
Lynn, who knows these concepts inside and out from his experience working with Roman in Buffalo. I get it. We all want to hop on the Gus bus right now and ride this narrative that the new Ravens offense is some sort of unstoppable rushing monster, but that's just not true. This system has an expiration date. It always has and it always will. And unless Lamar Jackson can rapidly develop as a passer to compensate for when this run game inevitably gets shut down, the Ravens are going to struggle and struggle a lot. I admire and respect the job that this Baltimore coaching staff and the job that Jackson himself has done to pull this team out of the gutter, but this new running game is just a tourniquet. Its only purpose is to stop the bleeding, and that's about it. At some point, that tourniquet will have to come off, and the Ravens will have to do some serious surgery to fix their underlying problems, but at this point, I'm not even sure what they can do to fix them. The expiration date is coming. Whether it's against the Chargers this weekend or the Browns next weekend, or even by some miracle 3 weeks from now in the playoffs, it's coming. I can only sincerely hope that if it does arrive sooner rather than later, Lamar Jackson is ready. Because if the Ravens have any hope of going on another magical January run, it's going to be on the strength of his arm, not his feet.
Man, I thought this video, I thought he was about to give us props the whole way, man. But, you know, he kept it 100, so, I mean, I'm a realistic fan, man, so I don't know. It didn't come against the Chargers in a regular season game. It didn't come in against the Browns either. I mean, came after that in the playoffs. You know, I love his videos though, man. He be, you know, he be having some good content, man. But I don't know. I just feel like he, feel like he was leaning on us the whole time, bro. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Blueface, baby. Yeah, I'm alone. Mac with the scope. I am Big Homie. One phone call, they go. Pick the wrong side. Glock put him courtside. Now he watching me shoot from the